Hi, thanks for joining me today. The topic is practicing psychometry. First, a special hello to my listeners in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. As I've said before, the two cities in the world that have the most listeners of my podcast are both in Australia. I always knew I loved you guys. Thank you so much. I appreciate the support. So, this is an interesting topic. It's probably one of the least known psychic abilities. And even though you've seen it, you didn't know what it was. So, let's talk about it. Psychometry, it's a great method to hone your intuitive skills, and you can develop things like your clairvoyance, clairaudience, mediumship. And our planet went through a massive withdrawal of touch during COVID. And you're wondering, what does that have to do with psychometry? Everything. Let me explain this. Handshakes and hugs went from expressions of joy and connection to activities where some people were afraid to do it. Most people still don't shake hands or hug like they did before. Most of us missed touch tremendously, and that time brought a focus on the importance of physical touch. Well, psychometry is a psychic ability in which a person can sense or read the history of an object just by touching it. It's also known as clairtangency. The name psychometry is mostly unknown outside of mediumship circles, but it's shown frequently in movies and television. They don't call it that, but they show people doing it. A person with this psychic ability is known as a psychometrist. Such a person is going to receive impressions from an object by holding it in their hands or alternatively touching it to their forehead. Such impressions can be perceived as images, sounds, smells, tastes, and emotions. This is a form of scrying, which means a psychic way of seeing something that's not ordinarily seeable. Some people scry using a crystal ball, black glass, or even the surface of water. With psychometry, this extraordinary vision is available through simply touch. A person who has psychometric abilities, a psychometrist, can hold an antique glove and tell something about the history of that glove, the person who owned it, or about the experiences that person had while in possession of that glove. The psychic may be able to sense what the person was like and what they did, how they died. Perhaps most important, the psychometrist can sense how the person felt at a particular time. Emotions are the most powerful energy recorded in an object. The psychometrist may not always be able to do this with all objects, and with all psychic abilities, accuracy can vary. I think it's important to talk about the history, like how did they come up with psychometry? How did it become such a known psychic ability and something people become professional in? Well, back in 1842, psychometry as a term was coined by a guy called Joseph Buchanan, and he was an American professor of physiology. The word psychometry comes from the Greek word psyche, meaning soul, and metron, meaning measure. Buchanan was one of the first people to experiment with psychometry. He used his students as subjects, and he would place various drugs in glass vials and then ask these students to identify the drugs simply by holding the vials. Their success rate was more than chance. So Buchanan published the results in his book called Journal of Man. To explain the phenomenon, Buchanan theorized that all objects have souls that retain a memory. So that was the birth of this. Intrigued and inspired by Buchanan's work, American professor of geology William Denton conducted experiments to see if psychometry would work with his geological specimens. So in 1854, he got his sister to help him, and he would wrap his specimens in cloth so his sister Anne couldn't see what they were. And then she would place the package against her forehead, and she was able to accurately describe the specimens with vivid mental images she was receiving. From 1919 to 1922, a guy called Gustav Pagensticker, a German doctor and psychical researcher, discovered psychometric abilities in one of his patients. While holding an object, the patient could place herself in a trance and state facts about that object's past and present. She would describe sights, sounds, smells, and other feelings about the object's experience in the world. So Pagensticker His theory was that a psychometrist could tune into the experiential vibrations condensed in the object, and that's where he is right on track. So how is psychometry done? And by the way, stay tuned because I'm going to tell you how you can develop it in yourself and how to know if you have this natural ability and how it's tested. I think you might find this fascinating. You could be really good at this and have no idea. So, Page and Stickia's vibration theory is currently getting the most serious attention from researchers. The information is conveyed to psychics through vibrations imbued in the objects by emotions and actions in the past. And these vibrations are not just a New Age concept, they have a scientific basis as well. In Michael Talbot's book, The Holographic Universe, he says psychometric abilities suggest that the past is not lost, but still exists in some form accessible to human perception. With the scientific knowledge that all matter on a subatomic level exists essentially as vibrations, Talbot asserts that consciousness and reality exist in a kind of hologram that contains a record of the past, present, and future. So psychometrists may be able to tap into that record. All actions, Talbot says, instead of fading into oblivion, they remain recorded in the cosmic hologram and can always be accessed again. Yet other psychic researchers think that information about the object's past is recorded in its aura, its energy. That's the field of energy surrounding every person and object. And according to an article at the Mystica, the connection between psychometry and auras is based on the theory that the human mind radiates an aura in all directions and around the entire body, which impresses everything within its orbit. It is not a theory. There are plenty of cameras. We had one at my business in Sedona that took pictures of people's energy, and depending on what they were thinking or feeling, it would change dramatically. And some people's aura is close. It could be within 6 inches of their body. Other people's could be 5 to 10 feet. So the aura field has been scientifically proven. In this book called Psychometry, Psychic Gifts Explained, psychometry ability is likened to a tape recorder because our bodies give off magnetic energy fields. The author states, if an object has been passed on down in a family, it will contain information about its previous owners. The psychic can then be thought of as a tape player playing back the information stored in the object. There's another person, Mario Varvoglis. He's a PhD at PSI Explorer. He believes that psychometry is a special form of clairvoyance, and he says, the individual performing the psychometry may gain psychic impressions directly from the person to whom the object belongs through telepathy, or may clairvoyantly learn about past or present events in the life of the person. The object may simply serve as a kind of focusing device which keeps the mind from wandering off in irrelevant directions. So what are the different ways you can use psychometry? You don't have to give psychometry readings. So let's talk about this mediumship. And I'm going to show you a couple of things here. So I love it when somebody comes to see me in person for mediumship and they bring something that belonged to the client and I can hold it, to the deceased person and I can hold it. Let me clarify. So this is just an example. This is an antique thing that belonged to my second cousin who's passed a long time ago. But you could bring something small. You can bring a ring. You can bring a pocket watch. You can bring a sweater. Anything that the person carried on them, wore on them, that carries their energy. So that helps the medium, and it certainly helps me, receive even more information about the person, the spirit that we're reading. In a psychometry reading, well, this may help you to connect with a loved one who's passed. Like I said, you can find out how they felt and thought while they were still alive, but it can also help people with life decisions, working through past issues or reconnecting with someone they never had a chance to meet. So there's a lot of reasons bringing an object into a reading can be helpful. It helps with lost persons. When I would do lost persons cases, we would have the person, the family, give us an item that belonged to that person that they touched a lot, held a lot recently. And we would take turns, my business partner and I would take turns holding that item and write down what we receive, what we see, what we felt, what we heard. And sometimes it's a picture of the person who's missing. All of that helped us with our psychic mediumship and remote viewing skills we use to find missing persons. Lost objects. It can be helpful in finding lost objects, kind of the same way. Antiquarians and historians like psychometry because they know that the readings obtain information, getting it from antique objects or specific places just by touching or being in a strongly vibrational location. It can help them with antique items and historic theories and maybe fill in some missing pieces they can't find in books. Here's another big one, police investigations. Clairtangent psychics have been used to help solve crimes for many years by holding or touching the objects of missing persons and murder victims. There are television programs. One of my favorites is The Medium. I love it so much I own the whole series, and it starred Patricia Arquette that really introduced many people to the idea that holding items, the psychometry can be useful in crime situations. Another one is energy clearing of home and business. When somebody hires me to go in and cleanse energetically their home, their business, or land, I am looking at what I feel in each room to see if there's anything in there. And I think this is more true for homes generally, because people tend to have antiques and items they picked up secondhand or were handed down to them. I'm tuning into how things feel. And if I get an energy like I need to focus on a particular piece of furniture or an art object, I'll go touch it and see what I pick up. And if I don't like what I pick up, the first thing I'm going to do is cleanse the energy of that object. If it continues, then that's an object that needs to go. You know, you can't clear everything. So another thing is just determining if an item is safe to bring into your home. If you like to go to garage sales, if you like to buy from secondhand shops, if you have somebody offering you a family heirloom, you want to read that energy and see what's contained in the energy of that. It sounds kind of wild, but I've experienced this myself where you just have something that you brought into your home and now things don't feel right. Things can even start happening. Maybe you don't feel safe. It depends on who owned it and what happened in the environment that piece of furniture or art or clothing was in. So people ask me, can anyone do this? Can everyone learn to do this? And I believe that they can to a degree. Just as with all psychic abilities, your natural ability, where your level is without any training, will be a large determination as to how high you can develop that gift. Psychometry is a great form of psychic energy reading for beginners. Holding someone's personal object gives you something physical to focus on and also provides a good boost of confidence. However, it's not to be confused with something called psychometrics. That involves different types of tests that measure IQs, emotional capacities, or learning abilities. Different thing. Because of the closeness between those two in the names, many mediums choose to use the term token object reading instead of psychometry. So token object reading, same thing. In my experience, many people pick up energy about objects. Most do not realize they're doing it. If you have a desire to learn and you're willing to practice, you will get better at it. And if you begin with a strong natural skill in psychometry, you could develop that to a degree which would allow you to use it professionally. And most people, I don't know anybody who does all psychometry unless I don't know anybody who does. I don't want to get into the unlesses. Most in kind of include it into something else that they're doing. It's an addition to, it enhances what you're doing. So are you wondering if you might be clairtangent, if you might have a natural gift for psychometry? Here are 7 signs that might mean you have this ability naturally. 1, you feel an overwhelming desire to wash your hands thoroughly after handling objects, especially rocks or crystals. A lot of you know rocks and crystals hold energy. It can be good, it can be negative. You have difficulty shopping in person for or wearing secondhand clothing or jewelry. Even being in a thrift store can make you feel overwhelmed. It's all the energy of the people who owned and wore those items. You feel uncomfortable in cluttered spaces. Cleaning, organizing, and decluttering spaces that you spend a lot of time in, like your home, car, and workspace, will help you remove distractions and energies that might be blocking your intuitive abilities. Considering every object possesses its own vibrational energy, just remember the more clutter you have lying around, the more energy frequencies you will have bouncing off one another. This overload of energies can be exhausting, and it can make it impossible to practice psychometry. Here's another clue. Sometimes when you purchase or receive items, you feel an unexplainable need to get rid of it. Even if it's something you wanted, suddenly you're like repelled by it. And it's the energy held within that object, or maybe the person who gave it to you. You can be overwhelmed by an emotion such as sadness or joy when holding photographs of others. You have experienced images or sounds when touching an old object or being in an old place. Being unable to use or purchase secondhand furniture. You might experience an explainable but overwhelming feeling when in a used furniture store or sitting on a family heirloom chair, for example, that you just don't want to be on it. You don't want that. I don't want to be near that. If you have not experienced any of these signs, that does not mean you cannot evolve and train to be able to read objects. It just means that perhaps you're not quite as in touch with the vibrational energy that surrounds us. In a world that's increasingly disconnected from nature and the living beings we share our planet with, it's unsurprising that many of us bury our sensitivities far deeper than we realize. So, how to determine your natural ability? How is that done? I can tell you how I do it. I've developed tests which involve holding objects that I know the history of. I know who owned it. I know that person very, very well. And answering a series of either or. Is it a male or a female? Alive or dead? Young or old? Heavy or thin? I mean, it's just either or, so that you're quickly just going with the spur of the moment, which is the best way to go. I give 3 different tests minimum, and then I score each and I average them. And that average score gives me the person's baseline or natural skill level. So these are done as part of a psychometry class I offer. It is a 1-hour class, and it can be done virtually as well as in person, but I have to mail the objects to the person if it's done virtually, because of course the objects must be held. I never knew I could do psychometry until I was training to increase another spiritual gift. And my mentor at one class said, let's do psychometry test. I'm like, what's psychometry? And I'm doing the test, and she's just sitting there. She says, Ivory, you averaged over 90% on every one of these tests. And she was amazed, and I was shocked because I didn't even know I had that ability. And I tell you this because it's very possible you won't know if you have this gift until you're tested. Since discovering this ability, I've successfully integrated more of it into my work and community work that I do with lost persons. It's been good to know I can do it, and I've worked to develop it more since then. So where to start? If you want to do this, you're really interested in it, you can start with your intuition. It always goes back to the intuition. Psychometry requires a strong level of connection to your inner self, and your intuition. Our world and the way our society's set up can have harmful effects on how we trust and interpret our own intuition. It's something we need to constantly strive to stay connected to. And some ways that you can help improve your intuition are getting creative: paint, sew, sing, dance, drum, whatever creative activity really lights you up. Do meditation. It can be guided or just meditation. Pay attention to your dreams. Spend more time in nature, especially barefoot. Here, where I live in Arizona, it's like you go outside barefoot and you're likely to get a sticker in your foot. So, be careful where you do that. Clear and balance your chakras. They are the spiritual energy centers of your body. And when they're in sync, your energy's flowing freely, comfortably through every part of your body. But when they're blocked, you can likely feel stifled, depressed, sluggish, powerless. Your third eye chakra, also known as the sixth sense, is in the center of your forehead, right here. It controls and affects your intuition and psychic abilities. With meditation and yoga, you can open this chakra and develop your intuitive skills. You can also develop your sense of touch in general. So I think this is actually a really good place to start. Since your sense of touch is critical to being able to read objects, it's obvious that honing your ability to feel the energy when you handle objects is incredibly important. To do this, all you need to do is become more consciously aware when you are touching things. We touch things all the time. Try to notice the sensations and vibrations you feel when holding objects. Choose objects that are personal to you and sit quietly with your eyes closed. Allow the energy to flow from the object into your fingers and palms. Don't think, don't rationalize, just be an open receptor. We're going to talk a little bit about how you can start practicing psychometry on your own. Here's how you can do that best. It's really is best if you have several people in the room and you don't know which person is handing you the object. So may you be blindfolded. One person will be taking notes or recording what you say so that you can have that reviewed later and find out the accuracy. So choose a location that's quiet and free of noises and distractions as possible. Sit in a relaxed position with your eyes closed. Rest your hands in your lap with your palms facing up so you're more receptive, like this. With your eyes closed or a blindfold on is even better. Ask one person to place an object in your hands. They should not say a word. The object should be something the person has had in their possession for a long time. Many researchers believe that objects made of metal are best, theorizing they have a better memory. I find that any items work great for this. Wood, photo, jewelry. One thing I use sometimes for in-person is I have this basket. It was made by a native Arizona tribe back in the 50s. It's an interesting thing to see what people pick up. Be still and open your mind. As images and feelings start to come into your mind, say them out loud. Do not edit or try to process the impressions you get. Don't try to make sense out of them. Say whatever you see, whatever you hear, feel, or otherwise sense as you hold the object. Don't judge your impressions. This is really important. These impressions may be strange and meaningless to you, but they could be of significance to the owner of the object. Also, some impressions will be vague and others might be quite detailed. Don't edit, just say them all. How do you get better at it? The more you practice, the better you will become. Like any other skill, you are likely to start seeing better results as your mind becomes used to letting go of thinking and simply receiving. It sounds so easy, but it is a process. You will become accustomed to seeing and feeling information. As you receive positive feedback on what you picked up, you will feel more comfortable about saying everything you receive, regardless of your personal feelings about it. At first, you will be pleased to pick up on things correctly, but the next stage is to follow the pictures or feelings, going deeper. There may be a lot more information that you can obtain. I want to talk about accuracy. Don't worry about it too much in the beginning. Keep in mind that even the most renowned psychometrists have an accuracy rate of 80 to 90%, and that means they're inaccurate 10 to 20% of the time. So there's no perfection in this, like anything else in the world. The important thing is to be confident that you will gain accurate psychic impressions when you handle an object. It's also important you don't try to figure out possible histories by the appearance or the feel of the object. So don't analyze and interpret your impressions to find out if they make sense. That would become your opinion, and then it's not psychic impression. It's better to simply observe all of the impressions that come into your mind and describe them with no attachment to them and without trying to control them. Often, the most unexpected images are likely to be the most correct. And if you edit out psychic impressions, you could be editing out the very word, phrase, or description that would be the most accurate and important for the person whose item you're holding. I did that early in my years of doing readings, and I would hold back because I was embarrassed or I felt funny or thought somebody might think it's weird. No more. I just put it out there, and you will get to that point too. So in conclusion, psychometry is a fantastic place to start if you're just learning about psychic abilities and you're interested in possibly doing readings. If you've already experienced some clairtangent abilities, you will find it easy to learn how to read objects reliably. For those who are starting at the very beginning, you'll find it won't be long before you notice that everything you touch is alive with its own vibrational energy. If you have questions about this or you've already experienced this, you're working on it, leave some comments. Everything you say on the topics is very helpful for somebody else who's also interested or trying to learn. Next Sunday's topic is types of spiritual cleansing. I will be happy to go into that for you guys. And in the meantime, may your angels surround you. May your angels protect you every moment, every day of your life. I'll see you next week.